Hey, I like your background.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty it's pretty sweet, but it kind of limits where I can put my desk because I can't put it in the middle of the room because then I wouldn't have the galaxy in the back. So this is like the only spot where I can have my desk. But
Yep, yep.
yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, nice.
I'm,
Thanks.
I'm embarrassed to ask, is that a virtual background or is that an actual canvas?
It's an actual tapestry.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was a virtual background and I was thinking to myself, like, wow, it is so clear around his head. I'm not sure how he like registered that. That's incredible.
Man, I should probably start making myself clear that this is the real deal. I don't want people to think
Yeah,
I'm skimping here in
yeah.
digital.
Nice pool in the
Wonderful.
background, Allie and Graham.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hmm.
So I believe we have one more edition coming, but we can start us off. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this evening. I know it's for those of you in Jackson, it's a beautiful day and hot congee is a thing to be eating right now. I'm sweating personally, but no. So the little background for those of you who have not joined, Full Table. The basic idea behind it is to bring together people around a shared theme, a shared meal. Usually, when we are dealing with COVID, we're able to sit in person and pass bowls around and pour each other wine and hurrah. But with where we're at right now, we make do with sending out a recipe and bringing together people over Zoom, and it works out quite well. It's great to have a conversation where you take some strangers, you connect them with a theme, and then before you know it, the conversation has a depth and a direction that
Yeah.
probably would not have been otherwise. So that's the basic idea behind Full Table. We'll pass it around, do quick little intros of who you are, where you are, and probably your connection to storytelling would be a good start. And then we'll pass it over to Graham and Allie after that to intro the food, and we'll dive on in. So with that, I'll call out Sam Hack there at the bottom. Put you on the spot, Sam.
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm Sam. A few familiar faces here. I'm Will's neighbor. I recognize Bubba. I worked at Giver this winter, and Jeff Moran there, my storytelling idol there at the Cabin Fever Storytelling, and that's where I started my storytelling career or experience, if you will. I was trying to get over fear of public speaking, and I also felt that it's quite valuable in business, marketing, and all things self-development as well, to kind of express what story you tell yourself every day when you wake up in the morning and how that influences your life. And as that applies to business, how can you tell a really great story to sell your product or service to someone and enhance their life through feeling like they're a part of that story. And right now I'm currently in Penn Yan, New York, visiting my family, and my little sister's graduating from high school. So I'm visiting
Oh,
out
nice.
here, but I do live in Jackson.
Beautiful.
Got it.
We'll pass it off to your storytelling idol, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. That was huge.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone. My name is Jeff Moran. I'm in Jackson, Wyoming. I think I might be like 2 doors down from Will right now. So my main gig is I'm the chief marketing officer at the Jackson Hole Ski and Snowboard Club. But and then on the side, I do a lot of emceeing and announcing for different events, all different kinds of events. And so that's the main way I'm tied to storytelling. Since 2014, I've been hosting an event here in Jackson called the Cabin Fever Story Slam series. It's put on by Teton County Library. And if you're familiar with the Moth, it's essentially our version of the Moth. So it's like a competitive in the sense that we give prizes for the top 3, stories that people, or that our panel of judges pick. But for the most part, it's just like an awesome community gathering and a way for people to tell stories. Like Sam's has quickly become a regular at the Story Slam. And so each of those events always starts off with me sort of introducing the event and then telling my own story that aligns with whatever that night's theme is, to kind of break the ice. And then we randomly draw from a bucket to get our next 10 storytellers of the evening. So you never really know what you're going to get. And it's always like every single event is always new and different and really fun. And so my role as the host of this Cabin Fever event plays directly into my role as the marketing officer at the club, because that's so much of storytelling and telling, you know, all of the marketing we do is trying to tell the story of what the Jackson Hole Ski and Snowboard Club is all about and what we have going on. So it's been really symbiotic over the last bunch of years as I've come into these two different roles, and they both support each other and help me kind of work each one out as I go through them. So, and I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Will. This is great.
Without a doubt. And for those of you who have not been to Jackson, in the winter, you either are skiing or you're at Cabin Fever. It's the only alternative in the winter. So it's definitely a really popular thing in town. It's fun. I'll go around my clock here. Monique would be next.
Hi. So I'm Monique, and I'm related to Allie. I'm the mom. And Graham, hopefully my future son-in-law. And I am related to the storytelling by, I'm a preschool teacher. So I'm always telling stories to my kids. And, you know, whether it's a book or from my lesson plans, I am telling the story. And I try to Google pictures and things like that, and to kind of get them involved and enjoying the lesson that I'm teaching them.
Beautiful.
And yeah, that's about it for me.
Yeah, thank you. John, I'll jump into the middle. You're in my center here.
I'm John. I'm in Carlsbad, California, and my tie to storytelling is I feel like it's just always been built into me. I just love telling stories, whether it's writing, sitting around a campfire, telling stories, having laughs. I just love storytelling so much, and I kind of just started writing. I just started writing stories and felt like I had the ability to tell a good story. So I went to work learning how to write screenplays. So I wrote a few scripts to kind of kick off my storytelling career, if you will. And then from there, I wrote and directed a documentary, a feature-length documentary. And then from there, a really good friend of mine, Jason Prawl, proposed a documentary project studying the blue zones around the world, the areas where there's the largest concentrations of centenarians around the world, exploring what makes these people live so long. So we had this pretty simple idea to just make a 45 minute film, and it ended up being a 9-part documentary series called the Human Longevity Project. It's like 14 hours long.
Nice.
Wow.
But it's pretty awesome because we were able to reach a lot of people and launch a business from there. And now we're on to the next project, which I'm super stoked about. So yeah, and while we work on that, I'm kind of writing my own scripts for myself, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. So
Beautiful. And then Bubba, and then we'll wrap up with Matt.
Hey, everybody. Sorry, I was on mute. So Bubba Albrecht is my name. It's like to be here in Jackson. It's like to be a part of Full Table. Kudos, and yeah, just super grateful. Not only I call Will Skipper, so forgive me if I throw that out there, but appreciative and very much admire the storytelling that you're enabling and the prolonged setting that you're creating with Full Table. So this is really neat. I would say I am more of I have plenty of experience telling stories, mostly when interacting with kids, and I worked at a summer camp for 9 years, and I found my favorite zone being telling stories that were made up or somehow combined a bunch of different stories in the creative realm. And at the same time, I would say I enjoy seeing other and analyzing other storytellers and seeing each person at their best in their craft of how they tell the story and seeing the nuances that come out. So we would do a campfire every night at the camp, and stories after stories, some really good, some were really tough to sit through. But the message was to the kids is like, get out there and you tell a story. And it sounds like the Story Slam is very much that same setting, is like whatever you can do to encourage someone to just get over that hurdle and give it a try and be supportive. It's a beautiful thing, and people come to life, and it's how we learn as humans and how we're here today. So I have a long way to go and much to learn, but super pleased to meet you all and to be a part of it for sure.
Awesome to have you here, bud.
Great.
And then Matt, welcome.
Yes, hello, everybody. How's it going?
Good.
Nice. Happy Friday. Happy Friday to everybody listening and watching. It's I just finished up my work day and slid right into this hangout. So very excited to hang out with everybody. Storytelling for me, it's been a part of my life since literally before I was born. When my parents met in a theater group, actually. They were both writers and directors and actors as well. And my mom was a lead in a show when she was in like her second into her third trimester. So I was like breathing it before I even could truly even breathe for myself. And ever since then, always been involved in different arts. And now I own a production company with a lot of my day one friends. And we're just making a lot of the content and telling a lot of the stories with the people that we want to be telling them with. So it's a gift, and storytelling is a gift and a tool and a responsibility. It's everything. It's all around us. So Graham, when I got your email, I got instantly excited, and I've been excited since.
Yeah, I'm stoked that we're meeting again after all these years.
Oh my God, it's so good to see your face. I'm inside freaking out.
Matt was actually my camp counselor for a number of years. We went to Camp Seneca Lake in Penyan, actually, Sam.
Oh, wow.
No way. That's
Before you
awesome.
joined Matt, Sam said that he's visiting his family in Penyan. Go Mustangs.
Love it.
I need someone to cheer for him.
Graham and Allie, do you mind introing the food?
Yeah,
Sure.
sure. Go for it.
Yeah, so storytelling food is kind of weird. It's always my first thought when we were going to do this topic was like Goldilocks and Three Bears. And so she eats the porridge, and one's too hot and one's too cold and one's just right. Or like porridge is this weird, gross food that people eat in movies and stories, and like it's just kind of weird and gross. But it's a food that is eaten by almost every culture on the planet in some form. And it doesn't have to be gross. And so kanji is a really great example of that. It's basically every rice, like every culture that has rice as a main staple. Kanji or juk is a type of rice porridge that people eat it with a bunch of different types of garnishes, when they eat it, how they eat it, the thickness of it. So it's a fun little thing that I thought would be a cool introduction to storytelling.
Yeah, and I think, again, like mainly in the rice eating countries, they're kind of like different, depending on your socioeconomic status, there's like different levels of rice that you eat. So in Japan, for instance, like the most like highly polished rice that takes the most labor to produce will get used to make sake, and then like just below that will be like sushi rice. And then as you go down, eventually you get to the portion that's like the broken rice grains, which is typically what this kind of dish is made from. So this is kind of like the peasant food. But if you look at like the food cultures around the world, usually it's the peasant foods that are the best. People aren't, the day-to-day like working class people aren't usually eating sushi or like drinking sake day-to-day, just as they're not eating polished rice in Southeast Asia and China. So I think this is like a cool, kind of like a cool cultural dish.
And I think in some ways it also correlates with the way that storytelling has like progressed through history. Food, like it's passed on through generations and generations. And this same porridge is something that people have been eating for thousands of years. And this is like some of the most basic food that you can get. And storytelling is a way for people to connect. And I think that porridge is also a way that people really connect.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. By saying broken rice grains, is that just literally like there's a perfect rice grain that's considered perfect and there's one that's not?
Yeah. So I guess like the easiest way to think about it is as you get closer to the center of a rice grain, it becomes more and more like starch and more like pure starch. And so if you look at something like sake, they want pure starch so that there's nothing else in it other than things that they can ferment, which will give like the cleanest tasting sake. So in the production of that, ultimately, like if you transfer many thousands of pounds of rice to a facility where they polish it or however they handle the rice, eventually you get to the bottom of the barrel where it's like broken grains of whole grains of rice. And so this is like the cheapest food source that people like working class people would be able to eat all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Super interesting. Jeff mentioned the moth during his intro. And Jeff, I was just talking with John Good this morning. I sat down with him and we had a conversation. It was really interesting. I was hoping he would be able to join tonight, but he's doing an open mic night, which I'm not sure how that works with COVID and everything, but I was talking with him and he was expressing how getting people together and to share these stories, that one of the most kind of beautiful things he's seen, or one of the results that he's seen, is that people feel that once they hear somebody else's story, that they can share their own. And I was curious, with your working at Cabin Fever and hosting it, that your role as the host, and you always give that initial story, which you always have to be careful because your stories are phenomenal. Same with John's, and it's one of those things where it can be a hard act to follow even before it actually starts. But that with someone like yourself or John, that as the host, do you feel that really sets the stage and kind of relaxes people who are going to share and it opens up the stage for them?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've learned a lot, and there's been a whole spectrum of how I view my role as the host of the Story Slam. We've been doing it since 2004 or January 2014. So I think we've had over the course of that period 32 different Story Slams. For those of you not in Jackson, we mostly only do them in the winters, like once a month in the winter, maybe do a couple in the summer, like out at an outdoor park. But for the most part, it's like based on, Cabin Fever, winter, early dark hours. Let's give people a reason to get out of the house. Mm-hmm. And so I've seen my role, like initially, it was, I didn't even know about the moth. I got approached by Leah Schlachter, who produces the Story Slam. She got my name from a mutual friend and knew that I do emceeing and announcing, and so thought it would work. Like I really had no background in storytelling, and so my progression through as the Story Slam has grown has been right along with that. And for me, I've learned how to take my role a little, I don't want to say more seriously, but figured out how to get more into it so that I can just do exactly what you're saying and like intentionally set the stage. I want, like, my goal when I get up there is I want to make sure that when I tell a story to kick off the event, that it's polished and that I'm not struggling. Like, I put a lot of time practicing and writing the story out ahead of time, because I want to make sure that sort of sets as high a bar as I can with my story. So people, when they come up after, like they kind of see like, okay, that's where we're shooting for. We want to tell really good stories. Because I'm sure, as all of you have seen, like, someone can have a really amazing story, but not do it any justice by the way they tell it, and vice versa. You could have a really pretty mundane situation, but if someone's an amazing storyteller and puts the effort in, they can turn that, mundane situation into the craziest thing you've ever heard. So, yeah, I mean, over the years, I've taken that role really seriously, and it's really made me have to dig deep and figure out, like, what does storytelling mean to me? And, I've kind of figured, I feel like I've sort of hit my cadence. Like, I didn't really know what storytelling meant to me before this. And now I have my my process that I go through to prepare. I'd say the hardest part for me is like figuring out a new story to tell every single time. Because when I was first approached for the very first Story Slam, I didn't know anything about the moth, and I didn't realize that I would have to kick it off with my own story until like a day or two before. And I was like, oh man, I got to figure out like what story to tell. And I actually had one and it fit. And I remember like working out the kinks, like walking to the event, that very first one. And now we're 32 events into it. And I'm like, okay, I got to find a new story that fits this theme. So it's really challenged me to like figure out like any story can be good. Some, events, like I said, are maybe more exciting just in the basis of what happened, but it's been a really cool, process to figure out how to like take anything that I can find in my life that fit those themes and turn it into a story, and then hopefully like engage the crowd and set the stage for that event being like fun. I think like fun, lighthearted, and casual is a really big part of the Story Slam, and just getting people to understand that once they get up there, have fun with it. It is nerve-wracking. I still get nervous, but just be yourself and everybody's going to be on your team.
Nice. Go ahead, Monique.
Does everybody have a different story, or is it a theme that you were to go with?
Every event has its own theme. So like, let's see, I'm looking at a piece of paper. One of our last themes was unforgettable. But everybody tells, whatever story they have. And it's been really cool. So we announced the theme ahead of time, like a few weeks ahead of time, so people can prepare. And then it's all, like I said, it's all random. If you want to tell a story, you put your name in a bucket, and we just choose 10. So if we have 20 names, we only do 10. And then for a lot of people, it's just a matter of coming to see the show. And, we get everything of the people who are engaging, or everything from those who are like, every single time have their name in the bucket and are like, pick me, pick me, pick me. And then you've got the people who've maybe been coming to the event for a few years, and they finally like muster up the courage to put their name in the bucket and are sweating bullets the whole time, wondering when or if their name's going to get picked. And they get up there, and it's like, those are the ones where you really see the crowd get behind them, because there's just like, they're putting themselves out there, they're it's like really raw for them. And like the whole crowd, like it's emotional, like how into it everybody gets, and we're all there supporting these people. So so sorry, I got a little off, but it's always a different theme, but everybody gets to tell whatever story they want that you think fits that theme.
Okay.
Did you say that there was a time limit on the stories?
Yeah, so we have like basic rules. It's a 5-minute time limit. Like when you hit that time limit, there's no hook, but we kind of ring a maraca or shake a maraca to let you know to wrap it up. The other rules are pretty basic. Like your story has to fit the theme. You can't do it with notes. It's all from memory. It has to be, that's pretty much it. Fit the theme, no notes. Oh, and it has to be true, right? And you can kind of tell if someone's making it up when people get up there and really get into their story. Like you can tell, like that's coming from the heart. That's not something they sat at home like fabricating just to try and impress the crowd one night at the Story Slam.
Do you ever offer advice to somebody that might be a little nervous going up on stage? Do you ever give them words of wisdom?
There's sort of like I have one of my note sheets because I had a feeling I'd get asked some of that. So there's a few things that I sort of mentioned at the beginning. And even though I think most of the people who come to the event have been at least once before, I kind of run through all the basic rules of how the event will run. And I give some basic like suggestions, but it's not really like a workshop. Like you're either going to try and tell a story or you're not, and either way is fine. But we say things like, it's not group therapy, it's not stand-up comedy. The more genuine and sincere you are, the more people are really going to get behind your story. And so it's just basic things like that. We have had times where people get up there and sort of use that platform to try and shock the crowd, or like group therapy. We've definitely seen it become group therapy, which can be a little weird for everyone. And with stand-up comedy, like a lot, I would say 85 to 90% of the stories we hear are funny. in some way or another, but we definitely get a good 10, maybe 20% of the stories that are dark and emotional and sad. And so it's a really interesting roller coaster for everybody in that room to have to go through to, you might have just heard the funniest story you've ever heard in your life. And then the next story might be about someone's, parent who just passed away. And it's like, it's all over the place. So we just let people run with it, just with some really basic guidelines.
Isn't that interesting that the really sad and kind of intense ones, as well as like the really happy, kind of lighthearted, joking around ones are what you see most of, that like in John's work, as well as Matt, that like producing things that it's about a lot of, or it can be about the facts. It can be about the story has to do with like climate change, something like that, right? I don't know exactly your projects, but that, do you hear at Cabin Fever anything like in between that, or anything in a different realm? I feel like those are kind of the main two you hear on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's some, I guess the in-between would be stories that maybe just simply kind of fall flat. Like people didn't really know if they wanted to make it funny, and they didn't know if they wanted to really like show their true colors, or not true colors, but show their, wear their heart on their sleeve. And if they like, if you have a really emotional, deep, sacred story, and if you're going to get up there on stage, like just let it out. But if you're pumping the brakes and you just sort of tiptoe around the darkness or the sadness or whatever your story means to you, then if you're not that engaged, then the crowd's not engaged. So it's like, take it all the way to like as funny and ridiculous as you can, and the crowd's going to get that. Or if it's on the other end of the spectrum, like just go for it, own it, and the crowd's going to like respect and feel for you too.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point you bring up when you talked about your role, in that when you're telling a story that you've made up, it's kind of your own personal discretion as to how you want to convey the point. But from John and Matt's work, when you're involving someone else, there's a certain degree of responsibility in storytelling to convey someone else's story. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more, John and Matt, how that plays into your perception, your relationship to storytelling.
Definitely. Well, first of all, Jeff, I just want to say you hit, okay, 3 things real quick. One is Story Slams. I went to my first one ever completely blind. I just got hired to shoot it. And I went downtown, got off the train, rigging up my camera, audience is filing in. I think this was years ago, and I only saw one, but I remember the theme was first love, your first love. And I had no idea what to expect. And it was like a couple hours. Everyone's was like less than 5 minutes. There were like 20 something people. And what a like roller coaster, like an emotional roller coaster, like no other live performance I've ever been to in my entire life. Theater, music, cinema, etc. So Story Slams are awesome. The one that I went to is awesome, and I think everybody should go and check one out. 2 and 3 are 2 other things, Jeff, that you hit on there, just like huge gold nuggets that I want to point out for anybody here or anybody else that's going to listen. It's one was about live performance and one was about storytelling. The storytelling part that you were talking about, Jeff, where if you're telling something honestly, people know always. Whether you know that you don't always know, but people in their conscious or their subconscious, storytelling is good because it's the exchange of like the human experience and energy. And so people feel it, I think it's a Maya Angelou quote. You don't remember what people said, but you remember how they made you feel. But yeah, so that honesty is either it's about something that's honest that happened, or if it's not a true thing or it's some type of fiction, thinking about it, writing about it if you're the writer, based on true experience or real experience if you're an actor. That honesty always, I find, is what will make something work that isn't working, and make something work better that already is working but could be better. 3 is the live performance thing. And you said one sentence. It's like, if you're going to go up there, let it all out. And everybody listen to that, because if you're a musician, if you're a story slammer, if you are into theatrics of any kind, if you go up on that stage, let it out. You'll like it. Why not? If you're going to go up there, let it out. So, yeah, Jeff, nice to meet you on Rock On.
Yeah. Thanks. I agree, right? Like,
Graham.
if you're willing to put your name, I mean, from the Story Slam perspective, if you're willing to put your name in the bucket, like, don't pump the brakes. Just let it all out. Even if your story ends up, like, being disjointed and not making as much sense as you'd hoped, if you get up there and you're, like, so passionate about it, the crowd's going to love you no matter what. And we see that for sure. We have a couple storytellers who are just crazy passionate, and sometimes it's even really hard to follow what they're talking about, but everybody's just like, we love you.
Yeah, totally. One of my best buds in the whole world, Brandon, shouts to the homie. He who also owns Business Lunch Productions with me, who also wrote movies and art, and he'll probably come up a couple more times, but he went to Fordham University for acting. And the one thing that stuck out to me that he told me about from all of his acting lessons that he did for 4 years straight was commit to your choices, you know? So that's another thing. If you're performing of any type, like you just said, go up on stage, you're going to go up there, you know the story, your name is in the hat, so you know you're going up there and you know the story you're going to tell. So go up there and like we're saying, just be honest, let it out, because people will overwhelmingly see it and accept it and embrace it. And that just, I think, is a feeling that everybody should get to experience, you know, because everyone can. I saw that one slam, I saw people of every race and gender and age. It was like, seriously, one of the most awesome things I've ever seen.
That's cool.
Oh, hell yeah. So yeah. Okay. So Graham, sorry, I digress majorly. Graham, your question to me is, what is this storytelling like when you're dealing with other people? And it's not just your solo vision. You're kind of like steering the ship with other people's cargo, so to speak. It is super interesting. And honestly, I think if it was the only thing that I did, it would drive me crazy, but also I think that if I didn't do it at all, it would also drive me crazy, which is why for Business Lunch Productions, me and my friend's production company, what it's always been based on is sort of two pillars of the company. One is like the creative section of the company, and the other is like the corporate section of the company. And the corporate was to like build up the company and fuel our creative projects. We kind of we went ass backwards. We started with a feature film for basically $0. That's a whole other long story. But yeah, it's pardon me. This is my dinner. I didn't have time to make the recipe, even though I am gonna make it soon. But this is my dinner for the moment, just a little medium roast espresso. But yeah, so you need to let your own honesty out, like we were saying before, which is why we have that internal part of the company. Like we started to make movies. We have these stories that we want to tell, some serious ones, some joking ones. I made one movie, or we had a sketch channel, for example, and that was silly as could possibly be. But we also have we do documentaries internally, which are some serious subject matter. Like I don't want to give spoilers to some of our projects, but they definitely deal with life and death, you know? And when we make those movies internally, at least when I write scripts, how I look at it is I try and write them in the ratio of life, which means we're living and we laugh and we cry. And my favorite movies are ones where you get to do both, like the Poetry Slam. I laughed and I cried at that. And to get to feel that range of emotions is, I think, what excites us about telling stories, listening to other people tell stories and stuff like that. But that's another part that is so special about getting to have the opportunity to steer the ship for other people's stories, because one of the things that we do, like for example, one of Jesse's friends from Brandeis, Graham, Jesse sends his love to you, by the way. I remember when me and our friend Jesse at camp, we had pit cooking hobby group, and Graham was just a camper, and all the campers were not interested at all, but Graham was always with us, the counselors, like in the pit cooking. And like to see grow up and be a professional chef, like the Fell level is like 101 out of 100.
He still talks about the pit.
Say again?
Still talks about
it. Don't make me cry on a podcast.
Laughing too, okay? Ratio life.
Yes. Yeah. Love you, bro. Good stuff. Good times. Life is good. But yeah, so telling people's story is, I find, it gives you the same feeling of listening to someone else's story and enjoying it. It's like you get to enjoy someone else's story, but be a part of it at the same time. And watching someone else's dream come to fruition is exciting. Like I was saying, so Jesse's friend from Brandeis, he had an idea. He's like, I want to make this short film. He came to us and we were like, how much money do you have? Okay, that's nothing. Good, we know how to do things with nothing. This is the corners we're going to have to cut. Let's cut these corners. Are you really down to clown? We're going to have to get dirty. He said yes. And when he met us there, we sort of met in the middle. And long story short, like, we're submitting to film festivals. The movie's done. We did it for 5 cents and it's made, you know? Like, if you have a story, you can tell it. In general, if you have a story of any kind, you can come to Business Lunch Productions and we can help you tell it. If you know everything and you're like, I know absolutely everything I want to do, we can just sort of help along. But also if you're like, I think that there's this one scene that I would like to do, it's like, well, okay, and we just, well, you spackle and putty in where we need. And getting to have the duality of both of those types of projects where you have your own to do and also get to help other people, you just sort of ping pong your experiences between those things and you get better at both of them at the same time. It's just, last sentence first to your question is, I think having the ability to bring other people's stories to fruition and our own as well is making both of those products that much more honest and energetic and showing of experience. So you got to have both.
John, can you speak to that? The Blue Zones project in particular is fascinating. That certain demographic you're working with. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with that?
Yeah, it's funny. We interviewed, I think, 125 people for that film, and
wow.
And about 90, I'd say, are people that are used to being on camera. They do podcasts and interviews, and that was just hey, we're shooting at 2:30. We arrive, we set up, we shoot, and it's no big deal. Some of these other people that we interviewed that are 104, these guys have never had a lav mic on or had a camera in front of them. So, you know, we realized that in order to get people to talk that are not those ones that are always on camera, they need to be comfortable and they need to trust you. So that doesn't start when we arrive. You know, if I know I'm interviewing somebody in a month, I'm checking in all the time. I'm going to try to talk on the phone. I'm going to try to build that trust. So when I get there, they're open. There's so many times where, you know, that didn't happen, and we sit down and we interview and the person just doesn't want to talk at all. They don't say anything. We turn the cameras off and now they're telling the stories and that sort of thing. So then you kind of got to re-engage and be like, hey, do you mind if we like pick the camera back on a little bit? And even things, you know, if I have an extra camera person with me and they've had the trust with me, but not the camera guy, you can feel their energy not being comfortable to fully open because they don't know this guy. They only know me. So there's been times where I've been, you know, had to say, hey, I got it. Why don't you step out? So that's one thing one thing I believe is if you're going to interview and try to pull out the best possible story, you got to put in the time to build the trust, and they have to be comfortable. And that seems to work every time.
I'd love to hear a little bit more, if you're willing to talk about your current project, which is how we met. And those are like stories that I imagine are like pretty raw and for a lot of people can make them feel really vulnerable. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you navigate that space.
Yeah. So the new project is we're exploring some ancient healing traditions, you know, and trying to extract some forgotten wisdoms of some indigenous cultures around the world. So we went to Nepal, and we were way up in the Himalayas, and we're able to meet up with Buddhist monks, and you know, we had a translator with us, and these are the type of people that have never, you know, probably never even seen a camera, and when you're in that situation, you kind of take what you can get from what they actually say, but you're going to be able to get a lot more just by getting like keeping the camera on them, because they say a lot with their expressions. You know, you can tell that they're happy or sad or frustrated, you know. So that was one thing that we kind of had to do in the Himalayas. We made another stop down in Peru and worked with the shaman down there, and we spent, I think, 8 or 9 days with the shaman, just going all around Peru, all through the Sacred Valley. And he was our main subject, and he had been in a documentary before, and we needed a nice, easy subject, and he was just on time. He was, yeah, let's go here. What do you need? Yeah, and you know, I'd take that every time. That was amazing. Where Graham and I met was in Costa Rica, and we were at a plant medicine retreat, and we were interviewing people going, you know, doing the whole week of the retreat, and the transformations that we were able to capture were incredible. But this, you know, again, this all starts with building the trust. You know, we interviewed several people to possibly be the subjects, so we began building the trust there, continued to follow up. And once we got there, we were super empathetic and understanding, and before the cameras ever turned on, because, you know, with this type of retreat, it's extreme. You know, people go through so much at these types of retreats, and to have them open up and completely trust us, we got, I mean, just some amazing stories from that. And then we've had a few other trips planned, but they've been canceled from COVID. But we're going to New Zealand to work with the Maori tribe, which is going to be, I mean, like number one bucket list for me. It's going to be an amazing experience. And then we're also going down to Colombia to work with a shaman down there as well. But, you know, we're just sticking to our tactics of you know, building the trust, getting them comfortable, and also getting them excited about what we're doing. You know, a lot of these people, they're excited to have somebody that they trust to share their message. You know, they don't want their message to be in the wrong hands or portrayed a different way. So we spend a lot of time explaining, I mean, in detail, our objectives with the project, and you can trust us. We're on your team, or we have the same vision. So even though we're not traveling right now, we're still very much in contact with these people, like just building that bond, making plans, and everything should be good once we're able to get back on in the air.
That's super cool. John, do you, I mean, what was the phrase you used for the medical retreat with Graham? Plant medicine, is that right?
Yeah.
It's an ayahuasca retreat, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. And so,
nice.
With that, is that something to make those people feel more comfortable and trust?
No.
I think he froze there. Well, I do have another question. If it comes back online, he could jump in. But
okay.
So when you go and you
Am I frozen? I'm sorry.
You were. Can you start over?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was asking with the ayahuasca retreats or plant medicine retreat that that connection and making people feel comfortable with you. Is that something that your team feels that going to the nth degree is worth that? So, hey, you have one of the guys go through with them, or at the Buddhist monks that like sitting with them for prayer in the morning for several hours and doing those kinds of things to create that is those are the kind of nth degree things you'd go through, or?
Right. At the plant medicine retreat, Jason, my partner in this film, we've both been through this, and you know, we've been studying this for quite a long time. And normally when people go through this for the first time, they're very scared. You know, they've heard all the horror stories. It can be a very scary thing. So we, you know, this is something that we fully believe in. So just being there to comfort them, you know, was a great start for that. And we also participated, you know, so we went through the same thing as all the subjects did. So we were able to connect on that level as well. As far as the monks go, that was a little bit more difficult. But we did end up meeting a lot of just local healers in the villages that are just medicine men, medicine women. And, you know, we walk in with our guide and a bunch of cameras, and they're just, because you can't just email these people and say, hey, do you mind if we come by and do it? Like, no, that's not how it works. You just walk in and hope that the guide can translate what you're saying. You know, it's probably not word for word what we wanted, but he kind of would talk to the person and then kind of look at us out of the corner of their eye. But you can tell that they're just like, what, why, what's so special about what we're doing, you know? And then we try to say like, hey, things aren't right in the States. We want to know what you're doing. Like, we're in this village out in the middle of nowhere. There's no store, there's no running water, and yet everyone around here is healthy and happy. Like, what are you doing that we can bring back to the West? So it's just, you know, in that situation, it's just showing a real interest in what they're doing.
And I think it's interesting. I think another point that I'm curious about is like when you make first contact with a group of people who maybe doesn't have like a favorable view of like a couple of white dudes from California coming in with like technology, because there's a big history of like those ancient traditions getting bastardized. And I'm with you. I mean, I think there's like an infinite amount of potential benefit to the rest of the world that's kind of fallen out of touch with those practices. But I just wonder how you've navigated the fear component of like going into these tribes and convincing them you're trying to do something that's good for the rest of the world.
Yeah, great question. And I mean, not everybody said yes to it. The Native Americans, you know, they're on our homeland. They're the ones that, you know, what you just said, it's like, well, we don't want these dudes from California coming in. But so not everyone said yes, but I don't think everybody said, yeah, let's do it. You know, everybody's been like, tell me more, you know. So it's been it's mainly building up that, hey, we want to extract your information for the greater good of everybody, and we believe in what you're doing. We want to learn from you, and we want to share it with everybody this way. You know, we have a very small crew. It's just me and a camera guy and Jason. So we tell them like, hey, we're not this big fancy crew. We bootstrap this. We rough it. We'll be, you know, sleeping on the ground. We don't care. We just want to be there with you, learning your ways. So it's just about, you know, getting them on board, that we're on board with what they're doing, and we just want to relay the information. But that's work too.
Sorry, I was muted. Do a little pivot here. Bubba, I think you were talking yourself down when it comes to storytelling. I would love to hear more about your personal experience and telling the story of a brand, that as the owner of Giver and the founder, that the story of Giver is something that really resonates with people and really makes people feel connected to the brand. And you've really honed, I think, that story in over the years, even that I've known you in the past 3 years. Yes, I'd love to hear more about storytelling when it comes to the brand experience.
I was muted. I mean, I think the biggest piece there, to kind of circle on what a lot of has been touched on, is the honesty piece, and as well as that element of, you know, let it all out. And I had a lot of thoughts coming out as everyone was talking, and like there's and I wrote down the ease of honesty. Whether you're nervous on a stage or you're telling a very heartfelt story or something super emotional, it isn't so much about how flawless the execution is, but, you know, when it's honest and authentic, it's whoever you are at your core, being expressed, and that comes with all the goofiness or the ticks or the whatevers. And so for me, at least, I think all those points are so important, is like, just be honest, be authentic, and let it out. And we're so fortunate, like, our story does originate from, heartfelt passion projects or efforts. And so to me, because it has that foundation, it's fun and easy to tell in a way that, as Matt, you were saying, like, you can like, we can smell the bullshit when someone's making something up or trying to tweak it one way. And Jeff, you even mentioned that too, is like, you don't even, like, everyone smells it. And the other side of it is trying to make a story more cool or more rad or more like glitzy and glamoury. It takes a ton of effort, because you have to keep track of, like, okay, well, I'm trying to go this angle, and then everything implodes. And so I think that's the that's the key piece, is owning that, and being, like, letting it all out in whatever shapes and forms. And I would say, and Monique, I'm interested to hear your perspective, because my storytelling history mostly is with kids, 10 to 16, as well as younger. But I wanted to just bring up the, like, audience awareness piece. If you're trying to teach something, or if you're trying to entertain, or if you're trying just to tell a story. But I was curious, I think the same story told to preschoolers, told to middle schoolers, told to adults, told to centenarians, there is a way, I believe, to tell the same story and connect to all those ages. But I do think to be audience aware is really, it enables you to pluck certain nuggets from the story that you're like, yeah, I feel like that will connect with this age or this group that I'm speaking with. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I was curious, when they give you comment on, the way your mindset shifts in telling a story to your students versus, at a story slam or in another circumstance.
Okay. So we have lesson plans, and we have different things that we have to go through. And so say we're talking about a bear, and there's different types of bears, and what should you do? And I try to make it fun, but get my point across that you really should be very loud to keep the bears from coming near you, and something like that. But I'll go into details about animals or about bears and stuff like that. But then we have music and movement, and we have this song, whatever, chant, whatever. It's called "Going on a Bear Hunt." And
yes.
So, yeah, right. So we're going on a bear hunt. We go through all these different things, and I just try to make it fun, and I go with them, and I'm dancing with them. We're marching through the forest. We're climbing a tree. Yeah, whoosh, 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 right.
Mm.
And it's just so much fun. And at one point we had, so it was right before nap time, so somebody's nap stuff was out, and this child happened to have a bear blanket,
Mhm.
and it had, so you could just put it on your head. And so got to the end, and we went into the cave, and big eyes, and big hairy body, and I put the thing on me, and I turn around, and they totally don't know what's going on. And then it's a bear, and I just scream, and I turn around, and I have the bear on me, and they laugh, and we go through the whole thing and getting back home safe and all that stuff. And it's so much fun. And my co-teacher, sometimes she doesn't even know what I'm doing. And I do it and she just starts laughing. Like, I can't believe you just did that, Monique. And then we'll have a teacher next door and like, we'll just scream. And she's like 60 something years old. And she's like, what's going on? You know? And so, yeah, it's just keeping them engaged. It's just the biggest thing. And you don't want to get too involved because you'll lose them. You'll lose their attention. So that's my way of telling a story.
That and dance part is really fun. It's sorry, Jeff. That I remember sitting in storytelling times, like growing up, and the teacher would be reading a book or a passage from a picture book and showing us. And after a page or two, you just lose interest. Oh, well, like, what are the bugs doing on the ground? And so to have that movement component, I think, is a really fun addition. That's awesome.
It is. And they, if I find that they're getting bored, I usually have my tablet with me and I'll say, okay, hey, you know what? I'm going to find something for you guys. And I'll show them a video. Oh, can you imagine, you know, just talking about a beaver and how it goes into the water and what it's doing. And wow, can you imagine how they're doing that? And they're so smart and they're just, you know, they really do enjoy the connection, especially technology.
Jeff, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. Oh, look, I've got one too.
Oh, you do? It's Ruby.
I think what Monique and Bubba are talking about is such a huge component to all of this, is knowing your audience, being aware of who you're telling that story to. I mean, obviously Monique and Bubba are on kind of different ends of the spectrum with how they're telling stories, but yeah, being aware of who's going to be receiving your story. If you're, I mean, you know, from my experience at the Story Slams, if you're a 20-something young kid who just moved to Jackson and you're all fired up on skiing and partying, like, that's awesome, and I bet you might have some great stories from it. But remember how you're explaining that story. Like, the crowd, you might lose people, and the same thing on the other end of, you know, the spectrum of who we get at the Story Slams. We have people, you know, in their 70s and like a little bit later in life, and if they're not telling a story that the crowd can connect to, it could be an awesome story. But if it's not presented in a way that's sort of accessible to who they're telling it to, then you can really easily lose people.
I see Sam Hack laughing. Sam, I want to hear about your storytelling experiences up there on that stage.
Yeah, I think Jeff's referring to me because that is me. But
no, you might fit that description, but that doesn't mean that your stories aren't engaging.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I guess one thing to just frame up what we're all talking about right now is, well, I'm a really analytical guy, and like when I was first thinking about going to do the Cabin Fever Story Slam, I watched like every TED Talk that was about storytelling, and I like did all this research, and I was like, I hope I don't embarrass myself. Which was interesting. And my first one was basically just at the end of the day, I was like, I just have to do one and like rip off the Band-Aid and break the ice. But one of the things I learned from the TED Talks and what Bubba and Monique and Jeff were referring to, you can just smell the inauthentic stories. And it's like, how do you know? And one of the things I learned was, I have some of my notes here from these videos, and one of them was 100,000 years ago, we started developing our language via storytelling. 27,000 years ago, stories were spreading via cave painting. 3,500 years ago were the first hieroglyphics and the earliest evidence of text. And then 3 years ago, Instagram stories. So what do you think our brains are best suited to receive? And so I think storytelling has been the number one thing that has lasted over time, because it's just so ingrained in our brains. We have such a good sense about stories and how to receive them and how to react to them and all of that stuff. But yeah, I have really enjoyed my storytelling. I think the practice is what makes perfect and makes for a good story. Just like Jeff said, he really practices them, and I do them in the shower and all that stuff because it's necessary. And the reason I have been really into it as well and realized that there's way more applications is of storytelling for self-development is kind of like, what is your personal vision for yourself, and what story do you tell yourself every day when you get up, and what character are you playing in life? I like that idea. And sometimes, like we were talking about, I am the 23-year-old now that's new and gung-ho on nature and skiing and partying and all that. And so it's like sometimes like, wow, am I this character in my personal story for my life? I like thinking about that, and especially in my sense of, do I think about my life in an abundance way? Am I a long-term thinker? Is my story going to be really long and very fruitful, or is it very short-term and very depressing? You know, you can describe that to yourself, and then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I like thinking about that, and in that same way, whether or not you use your story to your advantage, or if your story uses you, and it can really make or break your life and your plan for yourself. And the way that you feel every day, it can really be inspiring, or kind of put you back into your bed and make you sleep in for a couple more hours. So yeah, I've enjoyed it.
That takes a lot of self-awareness, Sam, right? I mean, do you think, are most people experiencing that like you are? I wouldn't say that everybody is. I think you had that self-awareness, knowing you as a friend, that you wake up in the morning, how am I feeling? How's my day going to be? How did I plan it out? Who am I seeing? And those components that you do view your life as like a story, which is fun. And I'm not sure that is the case for everybody, though.
Yeah, I don't know about other people, but I really do treat my life as like a video game, and I describe it as like living behind my own eyes. And whenever something happens to me, good or bad or ugly or happy, it's like, oh, this is cool. Like, it's part of the story. And same thing with emotions, which is like, if you have a really negative emotion or something like that, whenever something happens, I go, welcome to the party, anger. You know, like, it's just part of the big party. And I just love that that mentality about life, that good or bad, it's all part of this giant story that is your life. So I've appreciated taking that perspective on.
Did that life approach come from the storytelling, or like, is that something you've always done, or?
It's developed in recent years, and I think it is, I guess I describe it as feeling a little bit more enlightened or self-aware, because I remember feeling so many negative emotions in high school and middle school, and you're not even aware that you can control those things. And you're not sure why they're happening to you, or why it doesn't, some situation affects someone differently, or doesn't affect them at all, and it affects you greatly, you know? And so, yeah, I think it has developed over the years, and going through harder things, and then just reading a lot of stories myself, and a lot of literature about how other people think about those lives and their lives, and taking bits and pieces of what they say and creating your own philosophy about it.
Sam, I think it's so cool to hear your story behind how you ended up on the Story Slam stage, because I would have never in a million years thought that you had to talk yourself into it, or that wasn't like a totally comfortable venue for you. Like, you get up there and you like own that stage, you know, and you have like really engaging stories, which you can definitely tell, like, you put time into making sure you're going to tell your story well. Like, because we have people who I think, you know, are just inherently like a good storyteller, or maybe they just think they're a good storyteller and they sort of wing it. And that approach is great too. But yeah, I would have never known that you like went through a process to get yourself there. That is so cool to learn about.
Yeah, thank you. And to respond to Graham's question too, it all kind of started when we had our alumni weekend at University of Wisconsin, and we met some of the guys who were in their 70s from my fraternity, and they were telling these stories about their college days, and they had everyone on the edge of their seat, like literally falling out of their chair, like leaning in towards them and being so attracted to their aura and their story. And they would deliver punchline after punchline of fraternity stories or college stories back in the 60s and 50s. And you're just like, afterwards, all of us undergrads were like, wow, this was, we need to learn the art of storytelling. That was one of the most powerful things we've ever heard. And we all say to ourselves, why is it only old people? And I think, like I mentioned about the Instagram stories, we've taken so many shortcuts to express ourselves and to express our personal stories that we have lost that art. And so I'm really a romantic when it comes to preserving the old and old traditions and taking care of old things and restoring things. And so that seemed to be a really important skill to develop. And if it's that ingrained in our psyche, like we're talking about, and we can smell out whether or not something is inauthentic, or if someone is conveying authentic emotions, that seems to be one of the most powerful skills you can learn in life, business, or just building relationships.
I would love to hear somebody's thoughts on that predicament right there, Sam, that the social media platform is where most people who are between 15 and 40, right, somewhere that kind of range, are sharing their stories on a regular basis. And it's that instant gratitude, right? You post it and boom, my story's out there for everybody to see. And I don't think that everybody has the focus or the skill or the finances to get into those serious productions that John and Matt are kind of diving into. And they might speak otherwise to that, but does anybody have a platform that they would recommend or that they view as being, I guess in that space of a little bit more genuine, a little bit more solidified, like Sam was saying? Does anybody have a thought on that?
Cabin Fever, Story Slam.
Yeah, right. So Story Slams are a good answer, but then if you don't have a Story Slam in your town, or I know, like myself, I love talking with people. I probably would never talk at Cabin Fever just because it gives me a lot of anxiety, right? And so, like, for someone like myself, what is that platform? One of them I know of is Exposure. Anybody use Exposure? It's also online, and basically it's a platform where you upload images, you upload your story, and it just displays it in a really uniform but beautiful manner. And you really basic tweaking methods, like, oh, I want this image to be full screen or a little collage here or whatever. And it's worth checking out. It's exposure.co, I believe. And that website, you kind of wouldn't post a single image, right? So it's not the social media. You wouldn't post a little quick LOL caption, right? But at the same time, it's not the 5,000 image dump on Facebook where people aren't really looking through it, right? And so I think that the Exposure platform is a good example of, it's approachable, it's easy to use, and I think it's really, it shows it in a nice aesthetic manner. Does anybody else have something like that that they'd recommend?
I mean, I would say, I don't know if this is in the realm you're thinking, but for me, and I wanted to mention earlier, the set and setting of storytelling, I think of like camping or backpacking and being around a campfire, that it's all you have to do is, like, you kind of impromptu create a story slam by being like, hey, so I got a story, and like you being someone who like dives in, and even if you fumble and totally like bug it up, like it doesn't matter, like it's so appropriate, and like you try it out there, and you never know. And I wrote this down too. I was like, to be a storytelling assist, like you get up on stage, Jeff, I appreciate 100%. Like you get up and you nail a story in order to like set the tone to keep people pushing. And I would say in certain times I have like intentionally fumbled or sucked in order to like reduce the fear. Again, so much of my experience is around kids, but by being around a campfire, you're out in the middle of nowhere, and you like just pretend it's a stage and you start telling a story, even though people are going to make fun of you or joke around. Usually in a minute, you've got people like looking at, even if you're not telling a very like great story, but it's amazing how quickly you can get that. Again, it's a special circumstance being out in the middle of nowhere. But then there are a lot of little nuggets like that, like being on a chair. You have 8 minutes to go up to the top of the chair, and like pulling a story out of someone or seeing if there's enough of a connection or a lean in to then tell your own story. If there's an exit, you're going to get off the chair, hopefully. As well as I think a lot of times when we find ourselves in workplace, like Graham, you know, if you're cooking, if you're in a kitchen, you're around other chefs, and like story assist in pulling it out of someone else when you're doing something. It doesn't take much to pull on that thread where people are really excited to tell a story. I enjoy trying to get those out. And I think circumstances where you're doing something you're excited about, or it's a special setting or unique setting, especially not having cell phone or, you know, tech interruptions, because I think that is like throwing a bucket of water on the fire. Like it can just kill any story vibe. But I think those little nuggets and opportunities, try and pull them out of nowhere if you can.
Definitely, Bubba. I mean, Sam, what you were talking about with those older gentlemen from your frat, like, what was that? That was a story slam. This is a story slam. Life is already a story slam, you know? Like, and even more so to the energy and honesty behind it. If I were to tell a story right now, super honestly and intensely, whenever I wanted to, like you're saying, Bubba, like literally, we could be hanging out right here, and if I just went into a story about how I had a banana for breakfast, but I was really special to me, and I let it show to you guys that having a banana for breakfast was so special, that would be eons more riveting, and you could talk about that the next day, versus if I was droll and looking away and telling facts about the Big Bang and how time is the fourth dimension that we all, you know, like I could be saying something much more important, but if the honesty and earnesty and energy isn't there, then it's just not going to give yourself the opportunity that you can take. Like you're saying, Bubba, that's huge. Like you can take it whenever you want. And it's with literally telling a story, like a story slam. But like, I mean, it's kind of, there's a gift and curse of everything, right? And Will, what you're saying about social media and stuff, there's a gift and curse to that of everything, of course. But what that does is social media and just having computers and phones, everybody, like music or some type of visual art or movie making, anything. It used to be up until recently, you could, Bubba, like make a story slam right now. It's like you could decide I'm starting a story slam by engaging and telling the story special to me. And that's always been true, as long as, Sam, what you were saying about like someone drawing cave paintings on the wall like tens of thousands of years ago, that was them starting a story slam. And that's always been through humanity and telling stories. But now the world is in a story slam together because of social media. You know what I mean? So there is a lot of good and bad being shown because of all of us as a race being in a story slam together. But there's a good and bad. Definitely those things are happening. But overall, I fall on the side of the fence, Will, of being pro social media and using it to tell these stories and take our own initiative as humans to be part of the story slam of life. Because the good and the bad, there's truth behind both of those things. So we're all sharing truth and stories with each other. So I say, although I feel quite tumultuously towards social media as a whole, for the culture of humanity and storytelling, I'm totally for it. And I think it's kicking us up to the next level. I mean, it used to be a lawyer or a politician, you'd be the most powerful person and could do the most in this world. But now I argue it's the filmmaker. But maybe that's another discussion altogether.
And I think the set and setting that Bubba brought up is another interesting point, because if we talk about like cave drawings are only cool because we think they happened like a really long time ago. If someone invited you over to their house and like scribbled on the inside of their garage, I would find that interesting. But so I think it's interesting how the set and setting can affect our perception of the stories. Like whether we're around a campfire listening to a scary story, it definitely enhances how afraid you are in the woods alone where it's quiet. And so, yeah, so I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
John, do you, I think within that, when you're interviewing people and working on your projects, when you put somebody in front of a camera, do you think that their story ever becomes embellished? That they like, oh, I'm being filmed right now. I'm gonna like kind of boost this up a little bit. I feel like that happens sometimes, that people are telling a story in one way, and then they feel a presence of a camera or a video, and that, oh, I'm gonna kind of elevate this in a certain manner. Do you experience?
Yeah, for sure, and you know, you can feel people, and that's part of our job as filmmakers, is to buffer that as best we can. You know, some people, they just get riled up and they go. They're talking fast, and then they're mid-sentence. Oh, am I talking about the right thing? Am I doing? It's just like, just relax. You know, that's, and I think that's all part of the prep work going in to prep the person, get them comfortable. Right, the more comfortable they are, and yeah, I guess also people are a lot more comfortable in their own setting. You know, there's times where we were like, okay, well, we can rent this studio and just kind of shuffle people in and out, and that'd be very efficient for us. But we usually choose to go to their location, you know, whether that's their living room or their office or their home or wherever. That's just a no-brainer for us, because we know that the more comfortable they are, the better they're going to speak, the more they're going to cover, the better it's going to be for everybody, really.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
I feel like in some ways that's also similar, or in similar circumstances. Okay, Graham and I have been in restaurants our entire lives, and it's a game that we play sometimes with other cooks. Like, what's the scariest thing you've ever seen in a kitchen? Or like, what's your kitchen horror story? And we're all in the kitchen. It's at 12th hour of the shift. We're exhausted. We're waiting to go home. And we're all just kind of shooting the shit, waiting to go home. And those are the times where like the best stories happen to come out. Or we might be after work, like having a beer before we head home. Like, and so I think that also comes into, or the idea of like pulling stories from others. Like you hear one crazy story you experienced, and that triggers another thought of an experience you had, and then you immediately have to share it. Like you just can't wait for the next person to shut up so that you can jump in and tell your story. And I think that it's really interesting that I never thought of that as like storytelling. Like we were just having a good time and enjoying each other's company and just like entertaining each other. But and honestly, I wasn't really sure if storytelling really existed anymore until this podcast. And I didn't realize that like interacting with others and just sharing a connection, like rock climbing or cooking or interviewing other people, like your experience is interviewing other people. Like I think it, it is storytelling, and it's really cool to feel that storytelling is still alive and well. And like, even though Instagram and Facebook can sometimes feel a little bit like muddling that like instant gratification of showing the photo, but not showing the story that comes behind it. I think it's interesting that storytelling still does exist. And I'm really excited to kind of look through life in my own story, like character lens, like Sam mentioned. And I don't know, I think that's a really beautiful sentiment, and I'm really excited to just kind of explore the rest of my life in this perspective. I think it's really changed the way I look. I like it a lot.
You're going to see story slams every single day. That story you just told was a story slam.
Yeah, I almost feel like that with the more that social media, the more prevalence it has, that and it's so easy to share these quick stories like Sam was talking about, that it pushes people, whether they're engaged with social media or not, it pushes them to really like crave and want more of the moth, the cabin fever, right? Like you can have both, they can coexist, but I mean, I think we'd probably all agree, like you stare at social media for a little while and it's like you want to chuck your phone through the wall, and you just need something that's more of a human connection. And that's, it's like social media is potentially driving more people to want this long form live connection of storytelling.
And the thing with social media is, I think it's obvious, it's killing our attention span, right? Like we all want everything so fast. I even heard that Like when I listen to podcasts, I usually listen to them on 1.5 because you can hear it and you can still get all the information.
Dude,
and
you just changed my life. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that is like a hot tip.
yeah, you don't need it at 1. You can do 1.5 or 2 and still get all the information. But I had heard that people are pressing Netflix to have that option, and I was pissed when I heard that. I mean, I don't have anything on Netflix or anything,
Wow.
but I
Yikes.
forget who the director was, but he's just like, no way. He's like, every second of that film is in there for a reason. The music, the dialogue, the time that, the timing of this person walking from A to B, that's all so intentional. And now if you're speeding it up just because people can't take an extra 20 or 30 minutes to watch a film, like, that sucks. But it seems like people either love something short, like a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, or a super long form. Like you see these docuseries that people are just binging like crazy, but no one seems to love the 90-minute film anymore, right? Like I'm old. I still love going to the theater. Like I always go to the movie theater and I love that. And people are like, why? They think that's so weird to spend time doing that. But then at the same time, they're going to watch the 10-part series in like one day, So I don't know I don't know if the middle ground needs to be rescued or if I'm even off on that, but that's just something that I've felt, and I don't know what any of that means.
I think it's an insanity of choices that,
Yeah, that's amazing.
Say 20 years ago, you had, I don't know. I can't even begin to speak about film or TV or really, but like there weren't as many choices, and now there's a ton of choices, and there's also a ton of ways to say my choice is better than your choice, and how dare you step on my choice because I like to watch it this way. And so we have so many things at our fingertips that it's like the decision paralysis. It's like there is no wrong way, right way. But I think what cuts through all the shit is if it's a good story, people will watch it and dig it, and they will listen, and they will, as much as they might try to have an idea of when someone's blowing them up on Twitter, like when you're into a story, you're in. And like that is, it's so powerful that you can actually forget that your phone's buzzing. And I think the hunger exists in us, and it has for thousands of years, to hear those stories, because that's how we learn, that's how we can contemplate, and we can actually recall the story to then actually have a lesson to take away from it. So I think that there's so many choices with different stories and formats and lengths and everything like that. It's a wild world. I was going to throw out a question though, that we kind of touched on in the beginning, and would love to hear people's thoughts. But the one thing everyone's mentioned is like letting it all out, being you. The sooner you can do that, the better. Does anyone have tips, tricks? Jeff, you've done this a ton, but like to get into that mindset sooner, because like it sucks when you're 4 minutes into a 5-minute story and you finally get into your groove. But any like, hey, someone did this, or this is what I do before, telling the bear hunt story or going into class, like mindset, set and reset type things to just be your best and most honest self for telling stories or doing what you do.
I would have kind of 2 basic suggestions. This is just what works for me. Is one, like, know your shit, know your story. Like, it's in there, you've lived it, it's all there, but know the order, know what you're gonna say. Like if it is a story slam type of venue, then practice it. Like the more confident you are going in there to tell your story, the more everybody's going to be into it. And the second is don't care what anyone thinks. Like just get up there and do it. And like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Someone's going to like not like you, unfriend you on social media. Like just don't care, like do it for you and know what you're going to talk about and be confident about it and like do it for you.
Bubba, I'd say my best tip is my story storytelling has progressed from the objective to the subjective. So my first story slam, I literally just said the facts of the story, and it sucked, and no one liked it. And then now I'm really into how I felt in that moment. What were the colors and the feeling of things, and how I felt emotionally. And that really strikes a chord with people, and people crack up and they love it and they're on the edge of their seats. And I think that's a nice progression scale to put it on.
That's an awesome point. That's why reaction shots exist in movies, because you need to like tell people how they're reacting. You need to tell people how to feel. And when you put yourself in that position, you are helping people along with your story. That's well said.
Bubba, it's funny. My challenge with it is that I've always been somebody who talks really fast. I've always been somebody who stutters, right? And that I have so many thoughts going through my brain that I can't actually vocalize them as fast as I want to. And in doing so, I listen to myself in these podcasts or afterwards, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I sound like an idiot, you know? And it's funny because I'm talking with people who are eloquent speakers. I mean, everybody on here can say how they feel and what their experience has been like in a really concise and beautiful way. I mean, just this morning I was talking with, again, John Good, and he's the kind of person, he says one word and you're leaning in, you're like, what is he going to say, right? He just has this aura about him. It's a wonderful thing. And he was saying that with storytelling, how he got into it with The Moth is that he was reading poetry. He was doing poetry slams. I think that's something, Bubba, that I am curious about and I would like to start practicing myself, is even every night reading a line of a book to MJ, right? My fiance, and to slow myself down and to be deliberate about how the sentence is structured, because those things, it's that delivery component. It's less about the content that Jeff and Sam were talking to, but the delivery component of storytelling. Not everybody has that natural skill. Like I don't have that, you know. I'm somebody that I could talk with you for 40 hours because I'm super curious, but you would probably be at some point say, wait, what did you just say? Because you stuttered, or I lost you because you're going on this big tangent, like right now. And so it's, I think that the skill component in that manner is something to be practiced as well. I think that's interesting.
I would also say, as like a very amateur performer, is that repetition is really important. Kevin Hart's book is so funny, and he's got a ton. He's just like a walking like advice column. He has something to say about absolutely everything, and most of the time it's hysterical. And his book, he talks a lot about how he came up in comedy and like how he really wasn't that good, or he was seemingly inauthentic because he was telling stupid stories and they weren't about him. And so Sam, when you say like slowing down, talking about the colors, he mentions that exact same concept. And then he also talks about repetition and how important it was that he practiced every set with like a tiny little audience. And he has this like crazy system where he comes up with a new set, anywhere from 30 minutes to 60 minutes. He goes to a tiny club. He plays it a ton, like for a couple of months at this tiny club, and then he moves up to the smaller or a little bit larger, and then he moves up and up and up. And so like every 2 years he's shuffling around a new like stadium sized comedy special. And so it's all about just understanding what people appreciate and how you're delivering this content in a way that will get your point across. And I think and so he's constantly tweaking. And I'm sure that this can also, I mean, he's a storyteller in his own right. He's a comedian, but he's telling stories to keep people laughing. And he does the same exact thing. And I think as like someone who's saying growing up, just to like push all those butterflies out, it was so important that I sang a lot and in front of a lot of people. And even if it was just I found that like the smallest group of people was the hardest, because you were only with like 5 people who could really say anything. Whereas if you were singing in front of 1,000 people, it's a lot different. And so I think the same would be said about storytelling and just captivating an audience.
Yeah, I think the best piece of storytelling advice that I have heard, and this has always been my compass since I read it, I think it was Mark Twain, this is a Mark Twain story where he was staying at a buddy's place, I think out in Big Sur or something like that, out in a cabin in the woods working on his next project. He finished the project and left, and he left a note for his friend who let him stay at the cabin. It was like 3 pages and just explaining, thank you, here's what I did, blah, 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 blah. And at the very end, he said, sorry, I didn't have the time to make this shorter, saying that just make everything count. If I'm applying this to screenwriting, every single word's got to move the story forward. It's got to count. Otherwise, it's got to go out or get replaced. And I'm sure you can probably use that, in telling stories on stage, because as an audience member, now that I know that so well, it's just like I'm noticing things like that didn't push the story forward. Why is that in there? What does that have to do with anything? So that's not fun on that end of things. But when I'm structuring anything, whether it's the movies that we're working on or something I'm writing, or even a caption, if I'm posting something on Instagram and trying to write a compelling caption, like I do the same thing. I'm going to try my hardest to say the most in the least amount of words. Well, so sorry, I didn't have time to make this shorter.
I think that, John, in honor of your challenge of where's that in between material these days, the 90 minutes, I'm going to call us for the night, and we're at about 90 minutes exact. I think that's an awesome lesson to wrap it up on. To everybody who is on here, let's see, I'm going to go back into gallery view so I can see you all. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing. I always end these with kind of the idea that this is the beginning of the conversation. I think that it's something we could sit here and talk for 5 hours, and I would thoroughly enjoy it. But to have these thoughts marinate, to think on it, and you're all more than welcome to join a full table in the future. It could be about a completely different topic, but would love to see you all again. And thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it.